Hi there, Tracy Brown. So I've talked about this topic, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, in sessions for sure over the last 11 plus years, and certainly online and at least a handful of different blog posts. I don't think I've done a video on it just because I've done it, written before, but I thought it was really important to hear and to spend some time with this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an alert first. This video is not meant to create any kind of blame or shame in us. If that comes up, please give yourself some space and some comfort and some time to process this. But what I want to talk about is if you are constantly, especially out loud, saying I feel fat and making body berating comments when you're not fat. Because the majority of my clients that I work with are probably what I would guess call medium-sized to larger. Even though they probably, if the diagnosis for anorexia are a little bit different, they would be probably considered higher weight anorexic in terms of their thoughts, their behaviors, those kind of things. And so if that's you, I see you, and you are a majority of people that I work with. It's not to say that everybody I work with has an eating disorder. Most don't. I mostly work with people really struggling to make peace with food, but I would say it's 50-50. Some people actually have a diagnosis or they're on the edge. And some people come to me, nobody would diagnose me with anything, but I've been a chronic dieter my whole life. I've regained, let's say, 20 or 50 pounds multiple times, and I certainly don't like my body. And I'm working on making peace with that. So you're my people if you're relating to this. But I'm especially talking to us. And when I say us, I'm including myself in this. And I was totally guilty of it. And I learned, through my recovery, starting 20 years ago, that it's damaging when we berate our bodies around people who are bigger than us. And I know that's not the intent. But it is damaging, because if you are at a lower body weight and you're saying, I feel fat, the person who is much bigger than you is thinking, well, if she thinks she's fat, then what am I? And if she can't stand herself, then can she stand me? What is she thinking about me? And all that stuff is real, and that happens. So, and I say that, and that's where I want to help you and right now help you match or monitor any kind of feelings of shame that come up, because I know that wasn't your intent, and that wasn't ever my intent. My internal dialogue when I was in those shoes was so negative and so self-hating, and I learned that self-hatred through hating the body when I was a very young kid. So I knew by the time I was 8 years old that fatness was something to avoid, because if you are fat, and even more extreme than that, really was you're not really even supposed to be quote unquote average, because you want to be best, because that makes you more likable, you'll get more positive feedback. And so that's of course what I wanted. And I didn't really, again, we don't necessarily want the body size, we want what we think the body size will give us, which is approval and to feel safe. And so anybody listening to this, no matter what your size is, that's why we want thinness. We think that it will bring us approval and safety. And in some ways, if all we have as a way of buoying our self-worth or our feelings of I belong or I'm okay, if weight is the only predictor or indicator we have of that, of course we're going to put all our eggs in the how I look basket. But of course, I know that you're questioning and challenging all that, otherwise you wouldn't have found me. But so it's really, really important that if you are saying, I feel fat, or I don't like my body, or my belly's too big, or my arms are too whatever, at any size, that we stop doing that out loud to other people, because that teaches them to treat us that way. And they start giving us advice. Well, if you don't like your body, then go work out or go whatever. We don't need that or want that. So only talk about how you're feeling about your body to people who really get this, people like me, and safe groups that aren't weight focused or overly you know, talking about weight loss. And even I'm in many non-diet kind of groups, and some groups don't monitor this very well, and some groups are just so beautiful and do a great job at this. But the weight loss talk still comes in, and that's mostly going to come from people who are early on the journey. And the more educated people get and the more self-growth work people do, the more it is that we start to realize how damaging that is to ourselves and our own embodiment, but also damaging to others who, even though might get these concepts of intuitive eating and self-care and building a life not dictated by size, it still hurts because we've all got a lot of wounding. Most of us have, I call them T's, little T's or big T's of trauma around our weight, our food, our bodies, our worthiness, and so it's still hard to hear. And you know, the longer you're on this journey, the less it's, and the more you do your work, the less charge it gets, and the less it's bothersome. For me, when I hear people talking about weight loss, I don't feel any flinching towards my body, and I know it's just a signal kind of where they're at, but I'm really concerned for how it impacts others, and so that's why I speak up about it, why I'm making this video. And so I want you all to know that we teach people how to treat us by how we talk about ourselves out loud. It doesn't mean that how you feel isn't valid, but we need to do it in a space that can be held and worked with constructively versus just saying it out loud to people who aren't on the same paradigm. Okay, so the last piece, and I want to reiterate this, if you are in a smaller body and you're saying that you feel fat or that you're gross, other people around you are going to feel like that you're judging them. And I know that's not what you want, that's not who you are. That was one of the biggest